present to you CalTASH co-president Asia McGee.
Hi, my name is Asia McGee, and I'm your CalTASH president this year. I want to take a moment just to say thank you so much for logging on and joining us. We are so happy to be here with you in the same time and space. I'll tell you a little bit about CalTASH. It is the California chapter of TASH, the international leader in disability advocacy. TASH was founded in 1975, and TASH advocates for human rights and inclusion for people with significant disabilities and support needs, those most vulnerable to segregation, abuse, neglect, and institutionalization. TASH works to advance inclusive communities through advocacy, research, professional development, policy, and information and resources for parents, families, and self-advocates. The inclusive practices TASH validates through research have been shown to improve outcomes for all people. CalTASH, the California chapter, us, we are the largest and most active state chapter of TASH, and we were founded in 1982. CalTASH supports the practices that promote our resolution that all people, regardless of their label or perceived level of disability, should have the supports they need to direct the course of their own lives and to live and participate successfully in inclusive schools and communities. So if you are not a CalTASH member, I encourage you to become one or ask more questions, and we are happy to answer them. Again, we're really excited that you joined us today for this wonderful webinar, and I can't wait to get started with our keynote speakers. But first, I will hand it back to Diana, and she'll tell you a little bit more the next slides.
Hello, thank you again. So Family Focused Resource Center, where I work, and we're very lucky to partner with CalTASH on these series of webinars. So we help families that have kids and adults with special needs through education, advocacy, and family support services. We are housed in the College of Education at California State University, Northridge, and we are funded by the California Department of Education and the North LA County Regional Center. So please feel free to click on the link there, and you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Please feel free to register for our monthly newsletter so you get a lot of updated information about what we're doing out in the community. And we'd also like to thank our sponsor, California State University Fullerton Center for Autism. We appreciate your support. And now I'm going to have our other co-president, Caitlin.
Thanks so much, Diana. I am, excuse me, overjoyed to be able to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Mary Falvey, who I so luckily was able to learn from. Mary was my advisor through my doctoral program, and she is just a bright light to anyone who gets the honor of knowing her. Dr. Mary Falvey is an emeriti professor and the former dean of the Charter College of Education at Cal State University, Los Angeles. She's advocated for hundreds and thousands of students with disabilities to be educated alongside their non-disabled peers while receiving the supports and services to be successful. She's the parent of an adult son with learning disabilities and the aunt of a 31-year-old man with Down syndrome and autism. She has written, edited, and contributed to journal articles and many chapters of books, and over 11 journals, 18 books, and has written 4 books of her own. Excuse me. Dr. Falvey is a force to be reckoned with. When I was applying to graduate school, I applied where I applied because of her. Her work really guided the work that I had been doing in K-12 inclusive education, and she truly is an incredible mentor, friend, and advocate. I love her so much, and I'm so excited and gratified to be able to welcome her and introduce her to you all today. Welcome, Dr. Falvey. I don't think I can hear you. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, sorry. Thank you, Katie, for those beautiful words. And they are so mutual, so thank you. I'm trying to share my screen so I can get my slides up. And so welcome to this CalTASH webinar. I am honored to be here today. CalTASH has been near and dear to my heart. I've been involved in CalTASH since its very inception, and I'm grateful to be able to be here today. But I think one of the things that we have to talk about today is, where do we go after 2 years of a pandemic? I know that lots of kids, lots of adults have suffered during this pandemic in many, many ways that are really, really significant. But for folks with significant disabilities, the suffering, I think, has been extraordinary. They've lost time in school, they've lost time in work, lost time in all kinds of situations. So what we need to do is to commit to building inclusive communities that everyone, including the services and supports, are needed to create the work for and welcome everyone. So one of the things we have to do is start by breaking that cycle of segregation that kept people with disabilities segregated, isolated, and without a voice. Challenging times can, on the other hand, bring about new opportunities. As I've watched over the last couple of years during the pandemic, the needs of kids, particularly students with significant disabilities, who have been overlooked and not attended to during this time, I know that we really have to refocus our time, and we really have to refocus our service support, our service delivery models, so that children and adults receive the supports that they need. So we've all been challenged during this pandemic. Everyone was required to stay home or at least stay put for 2 years. Again, however, for persons with significant disabilities, they experienced more COVID at a higher percentage because they often lived in congregate housing, which exposed them to COVID, and many more were and are immune compromised. So folks with significant disabilities died, unfortunately, at a higher rate from COVID. And folks with significant disabilities have more mental health issues that have surfaced as a result of being isolated. And so what we need to do is to figure out how we can bring about inclusion, because inclusion will bring everybody together. Because it is unacceptable to segregate children and adults based upon how they look, the color of the skin, the religion they practice, languages that they speak, or how they learn. We have to bring them into the fold. We have to recognize that all of these people in these slides are, in fact, really worth including in our communities. This little guy here on the left is my nephew, Michael, that Katie mentioned during the introductions. He's now in his 30s, and this is him on the right-hand side. But we need to just figure out ways to welcome people back into the fold and be part of a community. So breaking the cycle of exclusion, really, we have in 1954 some amazing evidence that said segregation in public schools must be ended. And so in 1954, the plaintiffs in this case, which was the Brown versus Board of Education case, were African-American or Black children. And yet there was never really a mention of that, of what ethnicity they might have, of what color their skin might be. It just said that segregation in public schools must end. Because the dehumanizing folks with disabilities, we place them into institutions. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I want us to remember that our history is that segregation was the norm not that many years ago. So instead of institutional living, people with significant support needs have the right to live where they want and with whom they want, to have a productive life, be involved in their communities, to have access to friends and neighbors and coworkers, and really truly be members of the community, to have access to all aspects of community life. Because it really shouldn't matter how slowly some children learn, as long as we're encouraging them not to stop. We shouldn't segregate them because they may be learning a little more slowly. The truth is, each and every one of us, whether we have a disability label or not, learn slower than others, faster than others. And so we have to recognize that that's just part of our humanity. Why would we segregate? Why would we separate and alienate children from one another while at the same time teach them to look after the world around them and respect differences and take a stand at injustice? Children ask these questions all the time. It's particularly profound for children who are siblings of children with disabilities. They want to know why. Why can't their brothers and sisters just go to school with them? Why can't they get the supports at the schools in their neighborhood? I want to talk a little bit about the criterion of the least dangerous assumption, because too often for folks with significant support needs have limited communication skills, have a difficult time demonstrating what they know and how they know. And so often people make dangerous assumptions about them. Just because somebody can't answer questions on a test, or can't answer questions verbally, or even with sign language or some other AAC, doesn't mean that they don't understand what's going on. You know, when children are really young, like brand new babies, just came into the world, what we often see is grandparents, aunts and uncles and cousins and friends are talking to those babies as if they understand, because it is so important to start with that assumption that they actually do understand, that they know what's going on around them. I know that when my oldest son was born, I didn't give birth to him. He was adopted, but I was in the delivery room along with my husband when his birth mom went into labor. And I remember the nurse handing him to me. And I remember thinking, I better introduce myself to him, because I hadn't spent the last 9 months with him. So I introduced myself. We had a very profound conversation about whose family was. We're half Italian and half Irish, and my husband's Jewish. So we have lots and lots of relatives. And so I was telling him about that. That conversation was so important to me, and it was so important to him, because it was the first time we had a chance to bond and to connect through communication. I believe those communication pieces are so very important. And I want to tell you a little story about one of my students when I was a public school teacher many, many years ago. I had a little girl in my class. She was 3, and she came to the scenario with lots and lots of disability labels. She weighed about 14 pounds when she was 3 years old, which is far below what typical 3-year-olds weigh. But she had this smile that went from ear to ear that could crush anybody's concerns about her. She was just a lovely, lovely young lady. And she was just full of spunk. And she was making progress along the way. And I remember saying to her mom that I was excited she had made some progress in some things. I don't remember even the area specifically. And mom kind of ignored me and almost discounted me. And I knew this was a mother who truly loved her daughter in significant ways. And so I just said to mom, I don't understand why you changed the subject. Why is it that you aren't talking to me about the progress she makes? And she said to me that she was in a mother's group when Heidi was little and when she was younger. And she and her psychologist asked the moms to go home and write down their dreams for their child. And when mom brought them back and shared her dreams with the group, the psychologist said, but you haven't listened to the neurologist, and you haven't listened to all the doctors who have said Heidi will never do those things. So I've given up any hope. So at 3 years old, she stopped having any dreams for her daughter. That was one of the worst things we could ever have done to a parent, is to take their dreams away. We never know. We have to allow parents to have dreams, because that's how children achieve and make progress, whether they have disabilities or not. So let's recognize the importance of the least dangerous assumption, which basically says, don't make any dangerous assumptions. If you don't know scientifically what a child's ability is, then don't give it to them. Don't label them with that limitation. Give them the opportunity to grow and develop. Science is continuing to provide lots and lots of opportunities for folks with disabilities to achieve amazing things. And then there's this myth. I've heard this so many times at IEP meetings. The student is too disabled or has reached a plateau. People often will say it in the areas of reading and walking, in the areas of vocabulary development, communication development. But children and adults do not reach plateaus. Educators, job coaches, and other service providers do. That's where our limitations as an educator or as a job coach or as another service provider, that's where we place limitations. All can benefit from interventions and supports when they're tailored to the individual needs of the student. And then Mark Gold's work in the 1960s, where he talked about, if it doesn't work, just try another way. Recognize that it isn't, there's not an exact science of if this happens, then you use these kinds of interventions. But on the other hand, we have some of that information that can help us. And if it's not working, then try another way. So let's recognize that students are never too disabled, or there's no such thing as reaching a plateau. We should always presume competence. Expectations really matter. Think back on all of your own growing up and think about how, whether it was a coach, whether it was a teacher, whether it was a parent, an aunt, a grandparent, a sibling who had high expectations for you and how much that impacted in a positive way. Assessment tools are so flawed and are often measure what a student cannot do rather than measure what a student can do. And then communication interferes with our own ability to understand what a student knows, can do, and can learn. So recognizing that communication sometimes limits our ability to understand what students can do. So presuming incompetence is really, really dangerous. And then because I'm Italian, I have to tell another story. When Michael was in third grade, we had moved to a new school district, and the teacher had called ahead of time and said, can we meet? I want to get to know him a little bit, so can we meet before school starts? So my sister and I went down to the school to meet with this teacher, and she was, when we could tell right away that she was a brand new teacher. She was very young and very sweet. And so she asked us a lot of questions about Michael, but she asked us what were our goals for Michael. And of course, my sister and I had prepared a list of what those goals might be for this year. And when we got through with the list, she said to us, you know, you don't really have reading on that list. And I'm a third grade teacher, and every third grade teacher has to teach reading. And I said to her, well, you know, Michael doesn't really have the prerequisites for reading, because that's where my head was at that time. And so she said, but I'm going to teach reading anyway, because that's my job. So we left the conference, and I said to my sister, well, you know, it's nice that she's young, and, you know, I didn't want to rain on her parade, but on the other hand, Michael really doesn't have a lot of those prerequisite skills. Well, here's what this third grade teacher did. She formed a reading group with Michael and about 5 other kids who were brand new immigrants to the United States, and English was their second language, if even a second language. She put them all together in a reading group and used a lot of the Edmark reading materials that came from the inclusion specialist for Michael for all the children. And certainly by the end of the year, every one of those kids, including Michael, was reading. So I'm so grateful that she did not listen to me, and I'm so grateful that she had a vision that went beyond my limited vision at that time, and she taught me so much about the importance of recognizing that vision. And I love this cartoon. Some of you may have already seen it. For a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. Now look at those animals and see who's going to be able to climb the tree and do well climbing the tree. The others are not going to be able to do well climbing the tree. What is it we really are trying to measure? Because if we're not trying to measure climbing the tree per se, but we're measuring some other generalized skill set, let's find multiple ways to assess students that are consistent with what their abilities are. So schools that employ teaching practices that embrace all learners, positive and welcoming school climate, really recognizing that school climate makes a huge difference for all children. And one of the gifts that I think inclusive education brings to the table is that it recognizes this particular point, that all children need to go to school in a positive and welcoming climate, school climate. So all kids need that. Recognizing individual needs and meeting those individual needs. Collaboration between special and general education staff. Teaching self-determination and other communication skills. and access to the state standards and adapting and modifying when necessary, and universal design for learning and multi-tiered systems of supports are just such important strategies for us to be able to recognize the work that needs to be done in order for people to be effective participants, effective students in K-12 systems. And this is just a graphic that, okay, this is just a graphic that just gives you some ideas and some models for ways to think about accommodations and modifications. I just think it's a beautiful way to recognize that there's such a diverse set of learners in our schools today. And what we need to do is to make sure, because much of what we do for kids with disabilities also benefits kids without disabilities. Some who are struggling, some who are having mental health challenges, some who are not paying attention or have tuned out school, don't really like school. So let's give them some accommodations to help them to be successful along those ways. And I want to talk specifically about communication skills, because I think we've too often overlooked it and recognized that, oh, this is a student who's really not ready to communicate. Well, not ready to communicate means that they would have to be still in utero, because if you think about it, young children, babies, brand new babies, with their eyes, with their sounds, with their body movements, with their facial expressions, communicate extraordinarily. And we respond to that communication, and it becomes a reciprocal interaction. Too many students with significant disabilities are not recognized or acknowledged as communicating. Every student is communicating. Our job is just to figure out, what does that look like? Too much time is devoted to too many prerequisites before actual communication training is offered for a student. I'll give you an example. Too often on a communication system for a student, an AAC system, the word toilet appears, which is not necessarily the most motivating thing to communicate about, that I have to use the restroom right now. Plus, there's also some privacy issues that should be involved in that. So recognizing that we don't need to do the prerequisites. And again, people talk about the child's too disabled. And then there's not enough therapists and teachers who are proficient at teaching students with significant support needs, the communication skills. So we need to make sure we expand that. And I know CalTASH has played a really important role in expanding the capacity and the ability of speech therapists, of occupational and physical therapists, of teachers, to be able to recognize that there are many ways to teach communication and build those communication skills. And so we're going to offer multiple ways of students with intensive support needs to respond, because that's the first thing. So looking for kids in terms of their eye gazes, their eye blinks, any vocalizations they're making at the time of communication, their body orientation. So if I'm standing to their left, are they looking to the left to see? Is their body oriented to the left? Facial expressions, fixating on and tracking objects, and acknowledging through manipulating, touching, eye gazing, or body orientation. I have a 2-year-old grandson right now whose communication skills is limited to, what a 2-year-old does. But constantly what we're doing, his mom and dad, his grandpa and his grandma and all his aunts and uncles and his cousins, we're constantly helping him to understand the label of words, because the words are helping him to build his vocabulary. So there's some myths and truths about vocabulary development that I want to share with you. So let me go through these. So the myths: core words are all that is needed in an AAC system. I often see that AAC systems that are introduced to students are already filled in. They already have the vocabulary, and they're the basic core words like eat, drink, happy, sad, I need help. And that's limited to their vocabulary. We all want to talk about specific things in our life, people, places, and things. When Michael was in elementary school, we put together a little picture book that went to school every Monday morning. And then on Friday, they would send one home. And in that book were pictures of things that we had done over the weekend, like we might have gone to McDonald's. And so there was a picture of French fries, and it's just a conversation piece, a possibility that perhaps another first grader in his class would also remember that he also went to McDonald's, or he went to some other place, Carl's Jr.'s, and got French fries too. So those kind of conversations are so important. There's a developmental word list. Don't believe it. There's no such thing as developmental word list. I've watched literally hundreds and hundreds of children develop words, and their lists are different. Depends a lot on their environment. It depends a lot on their opportunities, because core word lists are frequency lists. These tell us how often a person at a certain age use different words. People need to be able to match pictures or receptively identify them in order to learn core words. That's actually not true. Not if there's a good system that honors the motor planning, because you can use objects. You can use real objects. I had a student that many years ago who was visually blind, and so he needed real objects for him to be able to touch, acknowledge, recognize, and then put forward as if that's something he wanted to communicate about. And often they're the first words that should be taught to people, not necessarily. For some, the initial path to communication is paved with words representing specific things, people, activities that they love. One of the things that Michael needed to have access to during his communication development was he had a Dalmatian named Angel. And that was really important, that Angel appeared on every page so he could talk about Angel. And often there's the old thought was they're too abstract for learners with intellectual disabilities. And that's really not supported by the research or the evidence. So probes for determining cognitive and linguistic functioning. So the student vocalizes during communicative interactions. That's communication. That is communication. Let's take from that spot and go forward. Uses speech to attract others' attention. Vocalizes vary with content and intent of messages. Is willing to use speech primarily to communicate with familiar or unfamiliar persons or known topics. Is willing to use speech to communicate with familiar and unfamiliar persons or novel topics or reduce contextual information. Messages are understood by familiar or unfamiliar people with individual speech. Uses appropriate repair and clarification strategies when not understood. And for those kids who are growing up in households where multiple languages are spoken or languages other than English are spoken, recognizing that we have to bring that in, because if we don't bring that in, that's the context in which the student has familiarity. So let me just share with you a couple of different kinds of AAC devices that have been used over the years, and certainly with the advent of the iPad or any kind of tablet, we know that we have lots and lots of opportunities and experiences. And in the middle, what you see is a letterboard, and we're seeing more and more students, particularly students with autism, are using letterboards in very, very proficient ways and communicating in very proficient ways. We now see college students who are on the typical college track who are using letterboards or other kinds of AAC devices and typing their responses rather than verbalizing their responses. So implications for teaching communication skills. First of all, there's no prerequisites. The fact that you're breathing, and maybe even artificially, it is the only prerequisite, just breathing. We might start with concrete objects. We might go into sequencing objects, pictures, words, and sentences. So we put the concepts together. Build generalization, age appropriate, making sure that we're being respectful. And age appropriate is so much better accomplished when students are included in their general education classrooms. Purposeful opportunities like functional communicative behaviors. So when students are doing things or engaging in activities that somebody else is bothered by, let's take a look at the communication. Let's take a look at what the communicative intent is for these students. And shaping a communicative response. Increase proximity, get closer to the student. Look expectant, look as if the student is going to communicate. The student is going to say something, is going to point to something, is going to show some kind of facial expression to give you that information. Don't forget to wait. It's very, very important that you give the wait time so students can process the information and then respond. Move the device closer to the student if the student's using a device. Provide a model. Have others have access to communication devices. Use verbal cues, physical cues, and always, always, always provide positive feedback. Give students the information about what they're doing that is appropriate and right. And so facilitating communication using keyboards and letterboards, I'm putting this in here today because I'm seeing so many more students using these kinds of devices. So identify left-handed and right-handed preference for the students. Some students are pretty much equal, and so kind of watch to see which side they feel more comfortable with. Examine how much support the student needs. Don't use more supports than are necessary. Seating should be comfortable. Select a variety of activities like pictures, letters, words, sentences, a variety of activities that you might talk about by using the letterboard, or they might talk about by using the letterboard. Explain what you're doing. Treat the student as competent in the age-appropriate manner, socially age-appropriate manner. Attitude of the facilitator is paramount, so important. Activities should be open-ended because then the student can take off. It's like when you assign a paragraph for a student to write. You don't want to give them too many constrictions because you want them to be able to write what they're thinking about. So be open-ended and maximize student success. And continuing on, pace activities, support students to avoid typed echoes if they get caught up in the keyboard. Fade support as soon as possible, and provide access to communication devices. And most importantly, respect confidentiality. And that would be true across the board. And so as we move into playground time, recess time, physical education time, specials like in the elementary school, we might have specials like singing or dancing. We want to make sure that students have access to their non-disabled peers, that they are in fact members of their community and being treated as if they are members of their community. Because of school inclusion, adults with disabilities break expectations and norms of the past every day. They obtain diplomas, not just high school diplomas, but college diplomas, graduate degree diplomas. They get driver's license, getting hired and doing meaningful work, work that is meaningful to them. Going to college. It's a wonderful program called Think College that is growing in leaps and bounds all around the country. But also just going to college, doing fun and preferred activities with friends and family, and living with whom they want to live with. And those last two items on this list are items that were obviously very, very limited during the pandemic. They often couldn't go places. They had to stay home. They weren't allowed to go to work. Their work was very, very limited. And also their living situation was very difficult. So the journey of creating inclusive schools, it may be long and challenging at times, but ultimately this journey can strengthen a school community and it benefits all children. I cannot stress that enough. It benefits all children. Time has come, and the pandemic might be just the right time to insert these values and practices into our school. I know that many of you have been trying to insert those values and practices for many years in our schools, and we haven't always been successful. And so perhaps now, as we look at, we're moving out into a new way of educating post-pandemic, let's bring inclusive education in the forefront on the table. Because inclusive education has been extensively researched for over 50 years, and the conclusions are there are many of them. Better academic and social outcomes for students with disabilities. Better, not similar, but better academic and social outcomes for students with disabilities. Better, or at least the same academic and social outcomes for students without disabilities. There are a couple of studies that have been done that have looked at that actually academically, students without disabilities have actually achieved at a higher level than their peers at a school that didn't have inclusive education. But at least it's going to be the same. Teachers seem to be more satisfied, especially if we've provided them with the training that they needed. Parents are more satisfied. And probably one of the most important aspects of inclusive education in terms of the research is that they have better post-secondary employment and higher education outcomes once they've gone through inclusive schools. And that just makes sense because inclusive schools teach social skills along the way. I mean, that's where all kids learn those social skills. How do you learn that you can make a high five kind of informal conversation with a principal, with a classmate that you might not do with a principal in a high school setting? That in the high school setting, you might shake that person's hand, or you might have a different kind of conversation with them. All those are part of the learning experiences that all kids need to have in order to move into the world of work or higher education or both. So recognizing that inclusive education provides the opportunity for students to learn those skills in significant ways. Wise words to teach by. If you've never read anything by Chaim Gannett, you should go out and get it. It's hard to find his work, but it's brilliant. He said, and he's, by the way, a Holocaust survivor, "I have come to the frightening conclusion. I am the decisive element in the classroom. It is my personal approach that creates the climate. It is my daily mood that makes the weather. As a teacher, I possess tremendous power to make a child's life miserable or joyous. I can be a tool of torture or an instrument of inspiration. I can humiliate or humor, hurt or heal. In all situations, it is my response that decides whether a crisis will be escalated or de-escalated, and child humanized or dehumanized." Just recognize that for those of you that are teachers out there, that you really do have an extraordinary power. Use it wisely and use it well. We will have a better world when that happens. So how do we make inclusion happen when exclusion is such a political predisposition in so many places? Well, we know that it's a social justice issue. It needs to be brought to the forefront of the social justice agenda in this country, in this world. School inclusion benefits, as I said earlier, both students with and without disabilities. School inclusion provides teachers with more teaching practices that can be used for all students. And school inclusion is about creating communities that really, truly work for everybody. Alone, we can do so little, but together we can do so much. Spoken by Helen Keller. Inclusion starts with a belief in what is possible, not what is impossible, because these are disability rights, which are in fact civil rights. The impact of inclusion on people with disabilities is that adult lives of people with disabilities are so much richer as a result of inclusive education. Thank goodness inclusive education is fortunately a bigotry repellent, because look at little Sam here sitting next to his classmate who will never, probably ever, have some kind of bullying going on around people with disabilities because she had a different experience in preschool. She grew up with children with disabilities right there in her realm. Creating a world that works for everyone, deeply and profoundly connecting all humanity, takes audacity and courage, creativity and gifts, letting go of our attachment to the status quo, transformation, radical revolution. It needs both head and heart. All are needed. We empower ourselves and each other. We're a long way from where we want to be and should be, but also a long way from where we started. Remember those pictures from the institutions I showed earlier. So don't give up. Keep going in the direction of creating inclusive communities that welcome, embraces, and supports all people. Our human family is complete when everyone is included. And then I just end with, I have a dream. Schools transforming to welcome and embrace all students. These are my dreams. And these are just pictures of kids who have figured out that inclusive education really does work. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening. And I think now we're going to go to, I'm going to stop sharing my slides so we can go to questions.
Thank you so much, Mary. That was wonderful and such great reminders for us as we come back together and really stay grounded in what matters and really reconsider the old systems that we are so used to, but instead really push back against that and really start to create anew. So thank you very much for sharing and for being our keynotes, one of our keynote speakers today. I'd like to open it up.
My honor.
I'd like to open it up for questions. If anybody has a question, you can drop it in the chat. You can hit the raise hand button icon. It looks like this on the bottom of your screen. If you would like to pop in and have your video or just your voice if you'd like, or you can put something in the chat, up to you. But we have about 10 minutes right now for any questions for Mary. So love for anybody who has them to be able to ask.
Yeah, the question here is it possible to get a copy of the PowerPoint? Yeah, I've sent it to you guys. So however you want to send it out, that's fine with me.
Great.
And we have a question from Shayna. I'm going to allow her to speak.
Oh, good.
Shayna, go ahead.
Hi, Mary. Thank you so much for that presentation. I have a 5-year-old with Down syndrome who the pandemic definitely, like, you could see the setback, plus he has like health issues. So he did have to miss his preschool, and he's entering kindergarten in the new year. And we were looking at what options we have for school that we felt would be a fit for him. And we found a charter school where it's a part-time homeschool and part-time in class. And we just, and so it was a lottery system and he got in. It's Da Vinci in Los Angeles. And we were really excited about it, but because we were on the trajectory of going to our public school and all the supports kind of in place within that curriculum, this is new and we don't know much about it. But my question regarding inclusion and carrying that message to that classroom, as well as into like the homeschool environment. So when we're in the world, right, in the 3 days that he's not there, like getting him involved, do you have a recommendation or a reading on how to like, or is there sort of like information that we can like share with other people who will be around him in his world as we want to like also spread the news of inclusion?
So I don't ever think there's one specific strategy. I think it's multiple strategies. I think the more you talk, and obviously you know your child better than anyone else, and don't ever forget that. You know your child better than the doctors do, better than the teachers do. You know your child. So as you introduce your child with all these positive experiences and all these positive aspects about this child, it will help other people to see him that same way. It is a boy, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it'll be helpful for that. I also have a book, and it's very inexpensive on Amazon right now because it's out of date a little bit, called Believe in My Child with Special Needs. And I've often given it to teachers to take a look at it. It's not complex. I wrote it for parents and teachers so that it could be fast read. It wouldn't have to be like a really complex thing. But I would avoid reading chapter 2 because it's so old that the chapter 2 is the legal chapter and it's out of date now. But the rest of the chapters pretty much are still the same. And it just gives people lots of tools and strategies. And there's just phenomenal websites out there that you can also refer them to give them some ideas of accommodations and modifications that they might make for your son along the way. And I think just continue to be passionate about it and continue to insist that they move forward and keep him in that way. Oh, and also any of the work that Paula Kluth has done. In fact, Paula Kluth's website are wonderful, and you can get really, really helpful information on Paula Kluth's website.
Also, thank you so much for that. Can you, if you can write his name down in the
It's
chat.
actually Paula, Paula,
Paula.
and it's Kluth, Kluth. Somebody will probably put it in the chat bucks for us. But she has a wonderful website and she presents all over the country. If you ever get a chance to hear, and she's funny and she's really fun and she's passionate and she's very skilled.
How fun. His speech I have one other question. His speech pathologist has recently, like about a month ago, introduced him to that ACA device for communication. She thought it could be a benefit because then he can get familiar and then, you know, communicate. And so we're starting on that, starting that process. And the question is, with that, is that just something that we as a parent, like, you know, if we start using it at home in addition to the services, we just kind of like present to the school, like, this is a great way for him to interact. Like, can they push back against it? Is there?
Well, they can always push back against, but it's not something that they would go anywhere with, because you've got a speech therapist already as a licensed speech therapist who's recommending it. So it'd be hard for them to actually push back on it. But I would, keep moving forward. That's an accommodation that should absolutely be provided. I would recommend that when he's in the classroom at school, that other kids could also use it, not so much to take it away from him, but to have it as an interaction device, because then it becomes less intimidating to other kids and they kind of get that. And kids love that stuff. They love to touch buttons and do things with little devices. So yeah, I would push forward on it. I think it makes a huge difference. Because the longer he goes without having a good, reliable means of communicating, the longer he's going to go into himself and not actually spread out. And so we want him to spread out and reach out to other kids. So you want him to have this device at young ages.
That makes sense. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome and good luck.
Thank you.
Ryan, I believe, had a question for you.
Hi, Ryan. Good to see you.
You there, Ryan?
Yeah.
You can go ahead and ask your question now. There you are. I think, Mary, he wanted you to see him.
Oh, hi, Ryan. I see you. It's good to see you. I miss you. Ryan used to be one of my neighbors. Are there any other questions?
We have a couple of questions here in the chat.
Okay.
And I don't know, Ryan, are you typing out a question and need a minute, or do you want me to move to the next questions? Okay, perfect. So the first question asks, what do you suggest if parents want to avoid too many pullouts and request push-in services? But there's always pushback from the IEP team and service providers to push into the gen ed class. What are your recommendations there?
Stay the course, just stay the course. Those services make no sense when they're pulled out and they're done year after year after year, because they're done in a little room all by themselves with an adult. Maybe there might be another child in the room with you or two, but it's not the same thing. When we teach communication skills, when we teach mobility skills, all of it should be done in context, in the place in which communication skills are actually happening. So what better place than a classroom? What better place for mobility skills than a classroom, a PE room, outside at recess? So push-in services make a whole lot more sense. I think that in recognizing the adults who are providing those services, many of them were not trained. to do push-in services, and they're more comfortable with the controlled environment of pull-out services. So some of it is just helping them move along to broaden and transform their service delivery model to include kids in classrooms, because those are the most logical places to actually teach motor skills, communication skills, any of those skills along the way. And then just stay the course. Easier said than done, I know.
Thank you, Mary. And then the last question we have here, and which is perfect timing, is what if school administration, one more question too, what if school administration doesn't want our students to attend school or be in the classes we're looking for?
So I believe that we need to create a community for ourselves. As a family who has a child with a disability, I worked very hard at getting involved in PTA, because that was a place where I met parents of other kids who didn't have disabilities. And as we build that community, we now have a stronger force to go to the principal or the administration and request inclusive education. I think a lot of principals and other administrators grew up themselves in segregated school systems, and they taught in segregated school systems, and they are segregated school systems. And so what we have to do is to break that mold. There's a lot of wonderful videos on YouTube that you can get. There are testimonials from families that you can get that just provide so much richer information, that give parents information to help them to move forward and convince administration that we need to make those kinds of changes. And then I don't have any problem going to school board meetings and educating school board members, because they really hold the purse strings and they are the final say on everything. So helping school board members to understand the disability issues related to educating students with disabilities, introducing them to the disability community so that they actually feel like they connect to this community in a way that maybe they haven't in the past. So I would again say, stay the course. And Katie, did you say there was one more question?
Yep, one more just came through also.
Okay.
How can we encourage general education teachers to embed IEP goals into their classroom curriculum?
Excellent question. The good news is that California is venturing out on a new journey for training elementary and secondary teachers that will include a lot more information and a lot more strategies as part of their training program around the education of students with disabilities. And I think that over time, we'll see the impact of those changes once they hit the workforce. That doesn't help us with the teachers that already are out there, but at least it helps us with the new workforce. But for the teachers that are there and have been there for many years and have taught in segregated classrooms, they've taught, because I actually think that special ed teachers are equally in need of a vision of inclusion, because a lot of special ed teachers have taught in segregated classrooms only and only see that model and are intimidated to think about going into a gen ed classroom, which is a lot noisier. You have to have a lot of different set of tools with you to be able to accommodate. And so I think that just keep talking about it, keep giving people information, share a video, ask the principal if you can have access at a faculty meeting to talk a little bit about the needs of children with disabilities. Get a group of parents together so you're not by yourself, to try to see if you can get them to change their way of thinking. And my experience has been over the last 40 years is that once you break into that mold and you help people to see and have the compassion toward kids with disabilities and understand the importance that they are really members of the community and they need as much learning opportunities in the community as any other child, you really begin to start cracking that nut. And it goes from lots of different angles. So, but I wish you all very good luck. You're the next generation of change makers in our schools, and I'm so grateful that you're all there, parents and teachers.
Thank you so much, Mary. We are so grateful to have you. And now I would like to turn it over to Shirley to introduce our next speaker, Elizabeth.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Caitlin, and also Mary. I think we're very fortunate today to have Elizabeth Grigsby as one of our keynotes this afternoon. I've had the personal pleasure of knowing Elizabeth for the past 26 years. We grew up pretty close in the same neighborhood, even though we also went to the same high school, few years difference there, quite a few. I feel that Elizabeth truly loves being a disability rights advocate. Her passion for advocacy is so evident in her daily work as the consumer rights advocate for Golden Gate Regional Center. Elizabeth wears many hats, and it would take me days to explain everything that Elizabeth is involved in. But to name a few, she's on the board of the ARC of California. She's one of the co-chairs of the Golden Gate Self-Advocacy Conference Planning Committee. She's chair of the Bay Area State Council, and she was previously on the Mayor's Council on Disabilities. And Elizabeth wears all these hats with grace, confidence, knowledge, and most importantly, kindness. Elizabeth always seizes the opportunity to educate folks about disability, wherever she is and wherever she goes. On September 17th of 2021, Elizabeth had the unique opportunity that very few people get in life, and that is to throw out the first pitch at the San Francisco Giants game. And she worked with Barry Bonds that day, a famous ball player, and she used the opportunity to educate not only the Giants, but also Barry about living in San Francisco with a disability. Elizabeth is a proud San Franciscan who, despite many challenges, has risen above and paved the way for many others. She's one of the strongest advocates I know. Elizabeth's had many challenges in her life, but she hasn't let that get her down. She has worked hard to take her own life to the next level, as she calls it, and that's what she hopes to do with her advocacy work. I'm really proud to introduce to you today my friend and colleague, Elizabeth Grigsby.
Thank you, Sarah, for that wonderful introduction. Yeah, like Shirley said, we've been knowing each other for a really long time. Let me tell you all about myself. I'm 51 years old with cerebral palsy. I was born in 1970 when doctors told parents if they have a child with a disability, they're not gonna live too long. And if they do, they'll be a vegetable. She won't be able to walk or talk or do anything. Well, I'm here today to say that doctor was wrong and he passed away. But I'm still here. I'm living proof that people with disabilities can do exceptional things with their life, given the chance to. So often our system tries to put everyone in these nice little boxes. We were told over the years, oh, these people, they need to be taken care of. They need to be safe. They need to be somewhere where they have their needs met. You know what I'm talking about. That was the medical model. But what they forgot to realize that people with disabilities needed to have a life. We needed to be with our peers. We needed to be able to experience what it was like to get hurt and get right back up on that horse and ride to our full potential. When I became able to speak, my foster mom would always say, oh, I don't want you to do this. I don't want you to go to the movies because you're gonna get hurt. You have a disability. Nobody's gonna be able to take care of you. So when my mom passed away, that's when I broke the chain. I became a radical activist. I was like, no more. I defy all rules just because I have a disability. You're not gonna tell me I need to live in a boarding care home. I heard about supported living, and somebody from Area 4-5 back in the day helped me get in to my own apartment. And though it was hard in the beginning, I love challenges. If you tell me I can't do something because I have a disability, I'm gonna prove you wrong. And that's how I teach other people with disability. Do not say the word I can't, because my parents said I can because I have a disability. The only, and hear me loud and clear, the only disability is when you give up and you don't try. And people's attitudes toward us are the real disability. Inclusion works when you work it. A lot parents are afraid to let their children experience what it's like to lose or not come in first or whatever. It doesn't matter how you get to the finish line as long as you get there. I'm so tired of the system says, oh, we have to have data on how little James is doing. So if he's not making the grade, something wrong with him. No, something's not wrong with him. Something's wrong with the system. Let Jimmy show you what he can do. Yes, inclusion is great. Kids should be with their quote unquote normal peers without disability. But who's normal? I hate that word normal. Because if we were all the same, life would be pretty boring. So what I want everyone to do when they leave here today is think how would you want your life to be if you had a disability? Would you want people to decide everything for you and have all these tests put on you? I have a friend who was an old tutor of mine when I first entered high school because I had an operation and I was out for a year. So I needed a tutor. And she reminded me that a psychologist did an evaluation on me. And because I wouldn't talk to the guy, and he put in his file that I was mentally retarded. And because I didn't talk to him, and then later on, somebody asked me, did you understand what he asked you? And I was like, yes, I understood very much. But the reason why I didn't answer, because I didn't like his attitude. I didn't want to talk to him because he was talking down to me like I was not a real person. That's what we need to change. We need to change how we see people with disabilities. We need to stop acting like we're above them. That people with disabilities, they can have a life. They always need someone to look after them. That's so not true. I want to be a part of a world that everyone is accepted. Yes, we have disabilities, but instead of looking at our disability, look at our ability. Open your mind, one mind at a time. Because you know what? If you live long enough and you get older, you're gonna have a disability yourself. And then you can think about how you want to be treated. I'm not trying to scare nobody here. I'm just giving you the facts. Disability is gonna happen to everyone at some point in our life. So when people are born with disability, instead of saying we need to put them in a special classroom, we need to take care of them, let them live, let them explore their potential. If I had listened to my foster mother all those years, I wouldn't be living in my own place today. I wouldn't be the rights advocate of one of the biggest regional centers in the state of California. I wouldn't be the chairperson of the State Council of Disability. I wouldn't be advocating for others with disability. I do it because I know we are much more than our disability. Our disabilities are part of us, yes, but it's not and never will be all we are. I'm Elizabeth Grigsby, the rights advocate in San Francisco, California. I'm a woman of color. I have two communities, the disabled community, which I love and I'm proud of. And I'm also a proud person of the LGBT. We need to bridge the gap and bring people together. We need to stop segregating people because they're disabled or you think they can't do something. So often I hear some parents say, my child needs a lot of help. And they can't speak. They don't know how to communicate. And I want to shake the parents. I want to be like, stop listening to what the doctor told you. If your son or daughter can blink or point one finger, they can communicate. It's not the person with disabilities, the teacher of how they communicate is us have to learn and follow them on how they communicate. Come on, it's 2022. People with disabilities are living longer. We're not going anywhere. Just please jump on the bandwagon. Jump on our crusade. Saying, be a valuable partner with me. Let's lift up people with disabilities. Let's include everybody in our schools, in our workplace, in our living spaces. People can have the life they so choose if they have people who believe in them. We gotta empower the disabled community. And I'll tell you this, as long as the breath flows through my body and I'm still here, I'm always gonna be a fighter for the disabled community. It's my community, and whether I have to be a martyr for my disability community, so be it. I'm ready for that next challenge in my life to go up to the state of Sacramento and tell legislators that people with disabilities are here to stay. We are one of the lowest voting communities in the nation. We need to let people with disabilities have a voice. And parents, if you're listening tonight, don't give in to what the doctors tell you. If you have children with a disability and the doctor told you that your son or your daughter won't be able to do this or that, don't just settle for that. Doctors mean well, but they only go by what their textbook saying. If I had listened to the doctor, I wouldn't be here right now speaking to you. I'm 51. Yes, I still have cerebral palsy. I try to get rid of it, but it doesn't go anywhere. But you know, but I'm just telling you, let your sons and your daughter have a life. Don't put them in a place where they feel like they can't do anything. Let them experience stuff in school, like going to the prom in high school. I had a teacher tell me in high, she asked the whole class, what do you want to do after high school? And I said, I want to go to college. And she laughed. And she was like, Elizabeth, you have a disability. You should just be happy enough to go to a day program. And I looked at her, I was like, I don't have nothing against day programs, but I want to go to college. I want to get a degree in counseling. And if you don't believe in me, that doesn't mean I don't believe in myself. And I took college classes at City College of San Francisco. And I'm planning on next 2023 to go back to school so I can get my degree in counseling. So don't tell me your a person with a disability can't have the life they so choose. That we can. And I'm not taking no for an answer. And I would love for each and every one of you to take that journey with me and just lift up everyone with a disability and say, yes, you can. We need to change people's mindsets. And I just want you to know, I want to thank CalTASH personally for asking me to come back and be one of the keynote speakers. I did it several years ago, and it is my honor to come back and speak to everyone again. And when you leave this conference tonight, remember one thing. Well, two things. That people with disabilities are just people. We want the same thing everyone else do. We want a life of our own. We want relationships. We want to be included in society. Nothing about us without us. We're here and we're proud, and everyone should embrace differences, no matter what it is. Because being the same is boring. It's very boring. So, if you have any questions for me, I can take them now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. We appreciate that, all your thoughts and being so open and candid with us, and really appreciate everything that you shared with us today. Caitlin and Jody, are you guys gonna check and see if there's any questions, please? You were very inspirational, Elizabeth. We thank you.
Yeah, I don't see any questions, Shirley, but we do have a lot of comments in the chat for Elizabeth saying thank you, thank you, thank you so much, Elizabeth. Thank you, Elizabeth. Very inspiring. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mary and Elizabeth. There is one question. At what age were you first included, Elizabeth?
I did go to a special school called Sunshine School when I was real little. And I have to say, they taught me how to be independent. And then when I entered junior high school, AP middle school, that was my first time being mainstream into regular classes. And boy, that was a trip because I had a lot of kids asking me, what happened to you? Why are you in a wheelchair? And I would just make jokes to break the ice. Because, hey, if you can't, if you're not all right with yourself, I mean, I could stay home and have a pretty party, or I could get out and have a life. So it happened when I was in junior high, about 6th grade. That's when I entered mainstream classes with kids without disabilities. And that was the best thing.
Amazing. Thank you. And then we also have a couple of more questions for you, Elizabeth. The first one is, what was the biggest obstacle you had to overcome, and how did you change perspectives of your abilities for those who didn't believe in your abilities?
To be honest, the biggest hurdle I had to overcome was my foster mom, because she gave me so many mixed messages. She would tell me, never let my disability stop. But when I wanted to do something, she would say, oh, you can't do that. You have a disability. No one's gonna be there with you. And it was like, it put me in really bad depression. And the tutor I told you guys about in my first year of high school, her name was Bonnie Barron. She helped me, and she believed in me. She said I could do anything, that I was smart, that she saw a light in me. So if it wasn't for Bonnie, and I hope she's on here, if it wasn't for her, I don't think I would have gotten as far as I am now, because I didn't have anybody really believing in me. until she came along.
Okay.
And,
Okay.
and now there's nothing. I mean, I do have depression, but nothing stops me. I love challenges.
Yeah, and you're obviously very good at overcoming them. So here's your next question. You have a lot of confidence. Was there any one teacher or person who helped develop that? Or was it just your own positivity?
It was all, it was a bunch of teachers in my life. But I knew there was something, even through all my depression, there was something inside of me that I don't like to settle for the norm. I'm just not that kind of person today. I listen to a lot of people say, disability, the state, we can't do this. And I'm like, I want to rally people. I want to get people up and say, somebody get a van and let's drive up to Sacramento. Because I'm tired of hearing we can't do this for people with disabilities. We need to come together like they did for the Women's March and Black Lives Matter. Disabled lives matter.
Absolutely. And you have one last question. Do you think it is even harder to be such an activist in San Francisco with so much political activity swirling around on different issues? Is it easy to get lost in the political activity?
You know, if you only have to focus on one or two at a time, if you're really passionate about something and you keep thinking about it and you go to bed and you dream about it, that means you need to do something about it. That means you can't sit on it. You have to act on it. And one at a time. That's the only way we're gonna be able to change things around here, because I feel like, and I hope there's some political people listening tonight. I feel like a lot of people say what they think we want to hear, but I want them to put action behind their words. And I believe that if the disability community will all come together, we will be a great voice to tell the legislators we need more funding, we need more inclusion in our schools. The teachers need better pay, accommodations. They talk about no child left behind. Let's really mean that. Don't just talk about it, put it in action. That means no disabled child left behind either. Don't just pass the child because they're cute and sweet. Have them because they're really getting an education.
Okay.
I love to push the envelopes, and I would love for all you guys to come with me and push this big envelope up to the state, the capital, and let them know we mean business.
Absolutely. I want to read you two more comments that are here, and then we've got one last question from Randy. Randy, I'll be right with you. So I just wanted to read you these. Elizabeth, wow, that is impactful, the missed messages you received. Thank you for sharing that. Also from Pam, thank you for your advocacy, honesty, and rallying efforts. You persist and change lives like others who have guided you. Thank you for thinking of ways to make change happen. And we've also got, thank you. Let's see. I'm with you, Elizabeth. Let's go. I heard you. As a parent, I hear you loud and clear. So those are wonderful messages. Thank you. And Randy, what's your question? You can go ahead. Sorry. There you go, Randy.
Hello. Hi.
Hi.
First, I really want to thank you for coming and talking today. I may fall apart. I still can't talk about this without falling apart. I need you maybe to, maybe you can tell me how to make change. I'm a program specialist at the Pomeroy Center. One of our participants was admitted to UCSF. By the time we found this out, they transferred her to a skilled nursing facility, a for-profit skilled nursing facility in Monterey. This facility subjected her to substandard care, and by the time they sent her to the hospital, she was dying. We need legislation to prevent hospitals from sending people with disabilities out of county.
Okay.
legislation to prevent this from, I do not want this to happen to anybody else. I do not want to see another person with a developmental disability subjected to this. What can we do? What can I do? I tried contacting the Board of Supervisors in San Francisco. If we can't do something on a state level, maybe start local, like just right in the city. How can we do this? How can we prevent hospitals from doing this?
First of all, thank you so much, Randy, for coming, for talking about this. I am a client of UCFF, and I had a similar, almost a similar experience in 2009, where I had aspirated pneumonia, and the surgeon who operated wanted to send me to a SNP, and if it wasn't for my nurse practitioner fighting for me to go to a rehab to get better, who knows what would happen. We need people to fight for our disabled people. We need to tell the doctor, if you don't know how to treat a disabled person, or you're not, or you need an advocate to explain it to you, I can come in. This should never happen. UCFF never should have let this happen. It was not right. I'm sorry. And I feel like, once again, the system is broken and it needs fixing. We need to stop looking at disabled people like we don't matter, because we do. And you need to keep fighting for the people you work with. People need to hear you. You need to be that squeaky wheel, even if people don't want to hear what you have to say. You say it anyway. Keep saying it till someone listens. Don't stop advocating for the people you love and work with. Because I'll stand right next to you. We need to go back to the days when 504 came about, when disabled people took over City Hall in the 70s. People don't want to rally no more like they used to. Carrying signs is not enough. Writing letters is not enough. We need to let our presence be known. And we can't be nice about it all the time. We have to let them know our life matters. Education matters. Inclusion matters. And you business people with disabilities need to be seen and heard. Their voices need to be really loud. And as long as I live, they're gonna be really loud. I don't care what it would take. I'm tired of the system the way it is. You're gonna respect my community one way or another. We can do it the nice way, or we can do it the hard way.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth, for answering that question and for being with us today. You really got us all thinking, and as a parent, I heard you loud and clear, and it's hard for me to, to think of, my son being safe and sending him out in the world. But you're a wonderful reminder to me that I need to do that. So I thank you so much.
If you want to talk any other time, I can email you, and I'm here.
Great. I know where to find you, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
So we do have a few, a little survey for you to complete. I think Diana's going to drop that in the chat just to get some feedback about today's webinar.
It will actually go at the conclusion of the webinar. They will get it.
Okay.
Yes, so when you sign out, you will see that survey. Thank you so much.
Oh, excellent. Our next webinar is going to be May 25th. It's also 4 to 6 p.m. And I think this goes right along with a lot of what Elizabeth was talking about, is advocating for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities to be out in the community, living their inclusive lives. And also, what do we need to do to make sure that they are safe? And what do we need to do to make sure that first responders understand our population and know how to support them appropriately? We also have some CalTASH swag for those of you who are wanting to represent CalTASH. I will put that in the chat. I had it already, but I can't send it right now because I have the slideshow up. But we have some nice merchandise for you to share about CalTASH, and all the funds will go towards making our conference and our webinars like this more accessible. I think we had already dropped some of these You can go to our CalTASH website, the TASH website, Family Focus Resource Center website. We're going to ask you to do that survey afterwards. You're going to be able to share the link to this presentation and see the slides. I believe some of that information was already posted in the chat as well, but you'll be getting more information about that if you'd like. And we want to say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you to Family Focus Resource Center for being our co-host. We want to say thank you to Cal State Fullerton Center for Autism for sponsoring the webinar.